matter is 14-119.
No. It goes off automatically. I'm sitting here like an ice cube. If you want to adjust the temperature.
Mr. Chairman, before we begin, for the record, the appellant in this matter, when the criminal charges were hanging over his head, did contact me to possibly represent him in defense of those criminal charges. I conducted a telephone interview with him. I gave him a retainer amount. He did not hire me, but I feel it's incumbent upon myself to put that on the record and to ask the parties if they want me to recuse myself. The only thing I know about this case is everything that I've seen in this packet.
Okay. First call. Is there any? Do you see any need to have Attorney Fishbein recuse himself?
No, I have no objection.
No objections.
Okay. Thank you. I just have a question, Attorney Drapp. Did your client take the oath at the beginning?
He did, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe my witness was present.
Okay. All right. Officer, would you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm, as the case may be, the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or under penalties of perjury?
I do.
Okay. As I indicated at the outset, both parties are entitled to an opening statement if they wish to make one. Wish to make an opening statement?
I do.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is a case of suitability as to whether the appellant has the essential character and temperament necessary to carry a firearm in public so as not to jeopardize the public safety. The evidence in the case is based on one incident that occurred a little more than 1 year ago when the appellant refused to comply with a brief, limited in scope inquiry by the West Haven Police to verify that the appellant was in actual possession of his pistol permit when he decided to carry his loaded pistol in an open and obvious fashion while in a public area. The appellant's defiance resulted in his arrest for interfering with police in violation of Connecticut General Statute 53816-7A. The case resulted in a discretionary revocation of his pistol permit, and I will present a member of the West Haven Police Department to provide details of the case. And based on those facts, the Commissioner of the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection will request the board to affirm the revocation due to the lacking judgment displayed by the appellant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and distinguished board members. This is a case of a law-abiding individual committed to public service and public safety who, and I don't believe I know any of you, but those that I do know would know that I don't mince words. He made a boneheaded mistake. But I don't believe that that mistake rises to the level of affecting his suitability to have a pistol permit. That mistake in no way endangered the public, endangered the police, or anyone else for that matter. And at the conclusion, I will ask you to reinstate the appellant's pistol permit.
Thank you, Counselor. Will you call your first witness? Sure. I'm going to call Officer Michael Vivenzio. Officer Vivenzio, please state your name and spell it for the record.
Officer Michael Vivenzio, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, V as in Victor, I, V as in Victor, E-N-Z-I-O.
What agent?
Police Department.
Okay, I'm sorry. I interrupted
That's
you.
okay.
What agency employs you?
West Haven Police Department.
How long have you been so employed as a West Haven police officer?
It will be 3 years this coming September.
Okay. Have you received training in the investigation of criminal matters?
Yes, I have.
Would you say your experiences in investigating criminal matters are more than or less than 25 instances?
More than 25.
Okay. On June 2nd, 2013, were you working in your official capacity as a West Haven police officer?
Yes, I was.
Do you recall the incident involving this appellant?
Yes, I do.
Please tell the board in chronological fashion what transpired during your investigation and the actions you took.
Detective Hunt and I were on what West Haven Police Department calls a beach patrol, and we patrol the boardwalk area that ranges from Bradley Point in West Haven down to Second Avenue. It's about a 1.5 mile boardwalk bike path. We were assigned to patrol that area that night on foot out of our police cars, in our uniform. When we were on patrol, we noticed the appellant and Mr. Jones walking west on the boardwalk, right by the bathhouse area. I had a brief conversation with Detective Hunt. Detective Hunt actually, pointed out that the appellant and Mr. Jones were carrying their firearm openly on their waistband. So after a brief discussion, we decided that we needed to speak with the appellant, Mr. Jones, to see if they had a valid pistol permit on them to go along with their firearm.
Okay, let me stop you before we go further in there. All right, and I don't know if you covered this, but what was your attire for that each of you were wearing that day?
We were dressed in our patrol uniform,
All right, so there's no...
our patches and badges.
Okay. And you said that you're describing this place as a boardwalk. Is it open to the public?
Yes, it is.
What type of activities do the members of the public engage in while at this boardwalk?
People generally walk, run, bike, jog. There's a playground just adjacent to the boardwalk. This weekend there's actually a carnival in the boardwalk area.
Okay, is there any area of the boardwalk designated for recreation shooting of the firearms?
No.
Okay. Why does the West Haven Police Department assign uniform officers to patrol this area?
Really just to protect the general public. We do have calls for service on a regular basis for things like fights or thefts, animal complaints.
Okay. At the time of this incident, were other members of the public nearby?
Yes, there were.
Okay. All right. Now, you were saying, I'm sorry, you stated in your testimony here that you were patrolling that area, you were assigned to patrol the area, when the appellant and another individual, an associate, were walking together westward on the boardwalk, correct?
That's correct.
And how long did you observe them?
Maybe for about a minute or so.
Okay. Were the men doing anything illegal?
No.
Okay. So I think what the board wants to know is, what was the purpose for approaching and confronting these two men?
Our purpose was to, to be sure that the appellant and his associate had a valid pistol permit on their person along with their firearm.
Okay. So now that we're there, what transpired after that?
So as Detective Hunt observed the appellant and Mr. Jones walking, again, he pointed them out to me. We had a brief discussion, that he did observe a firearm. I saw the same firearm on both the appellant and Mr. Jones on their waist in open display. At that point...
I think you just said, I want to correct, I believe you just said they had the same firearm?
They had, not the same, no, they had pistols on their waistband.
Okay. Each man?
Each man.
Okay, go ahead. Go forward from there.
So we decided to stop them and see if they had their pistol permits on them along with their firearm. We approached them from behind. We stopped them. Again, we were in our uniforms. We were clearly identifiable as police officers, and we asked them if they had valid permits to carry their firearms. And the appellant and his associate did say they did. At that point, we asked each of them if they can produce their permit for us. Mr. Jones is the one I was interacting with directly, pulled out his permit from his wallet. I verified that it was valid, gave it back to him, told him that he was on his way. Detective Hunt spoke to the appellant in the same manner, asked for his permit. The appellant refused to show his permit. Detective Hunt asked him again if he could, please show him his permit so he can, be assured that he does have a valid permit to carry the firearm. The appellant at that point started to recite, I believe it was California statutes or a case saying that he didn't have to produce his permit when asked. Detective Funt advised him that he was in Connecticut and that he's requesting his permit, and he needed to show it to Detective Hunt. The appellant again refused. I believe Detective Hunt may have asked the appellant one more time to produce his permit, at which point Detective Funt advised him that he was going to be under arrest. The appellant was handcuffed, arrested. The firearm was removed from its waistband and was secured.
Before we proceed, is there some reason Hunt's not here?
I believe he's off today. I'm not sure if he's on vacation. I'm not sure what his status
All
is.
right. Go ahead.
Was there ever at any moment that you heard Detective Hunt explain to the appellant what conclusion he would draw based on the appellant's responses? And if so, what was that conclusion?
Right. Detective Hunt basically just wanted to verify that he had a valid permit to go along with his firearm. Once he produced that permit, they were free to go. It was meant to be a brief interaction just to see if they had the permits on them. They were openly carrying their firearms, so we just needed to verify that. As Mr. Jones did, once he verified that he had his permit on him, he was free to go. It was a very brief interaction.
Yeah, I believe the question is, to answer the question was, at any point in time, did you hear your fellow officer inform the appellant of what presumption could and would be made if he failed to produce the permit?
I'm sorry, yes.
I believe that was your question.
That is correct,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Right. Detective Hunt advised the appellant that if he didn't produce his permit, he can only assume that he did not have one to legally carry his firearm.
And you heard Hunt inform the appellant of that?
Yes. Hunt and I were within 3 or 4 feet from each other.
Okay.
And
Go ahead.
were you still interacting with Mr. Long?
Not really. Mr. Long, again, produced his permit, and he was pretty much free to go. So I was...
Mr. Long?
Did I say Mr. Long? Mr.
That's Mr. Jones.
Mr. Jones.
My mistake. My mistake. Mr. Jones, were you still interacting with him?
No, he was free to go after I verified he had a valid permit.
Okay. So your attention was now with Detective Hunt and the appellant?
Yes.
Okay.
I heard that Detective Hunt was, asking the same question, multiple times, and the appellant wasn't cooperative. So my attention focused towards Detective Hunt at that point.
Okay. And after reciting his position, Detective Hunt, what occurred then?
Detective Hunt, like I said, he asked the appellant for a permit. He denied it, denied showing it. Detective Hunt advised him that he was under arrest. He was handcuffed. The firearm was removed. He was searched. And then he was transported back to headquarters.
And processed on what
And
charge?
processed on interfering with the police officer.
And the firearm, what happened with the firearm?
The firearm was made safe on the scene. Detective Hunt did seize the firearm. I believe his permit. The firearm was loaded. He had, I believe, 2 magazines, approximately 20 rounds. And that was secured into evidence.
Okay. Now, I want to get back to Mr. Jones briefly. How long did it take to, from the point that you initiated contact with the 2 men to the time that Mr. Jones was able to leave freely?
It was very quick, probably about a minute or so, maybe a minute and a half. By the time we asked for his permit, he produced it immediately. I checked it. So it was, I would say, a minute, maybe 2 minutes. It was very quick.
And did you instruct Mr. Jones in any manner, question, when Mr. Jones was allowed to leave? I need to ask it this way, but were any instructions provided to him as far as the manner that he was carrying the firearm?
No. He showed us the permit. We didn't tell him to conceal it. He left the way he was first observed with the firearm, exposed.
And beyond the pistol permit that you're requesting from him, was there any other more intrusive search that was conducted on his person?
No.
Okay. All right. Is there, have you had any other interactions with the appellant prior to or since this incident?
No, I haven't.
And is there any other information that you can recall that would assist the board in trying to determine whether he's a suitable person?
Really just the whole interaction that Detective Hunt had with the appellant. He was evasive. He wasn't forthcoming with information. He was essentially just not complying with, some basic requests by Detective Hunt. And that's what really got my attention when Detective Hunt and the appellant were interacting, that Detective Hunt wasn't getting, appropriate responses or quick answers, as I did with Mr. Jones. So again, yeah, he was, again, not forthcoming, gave Detective Hunt a hard time when Detective Hunt was conducting his investigation. So that's that again.
Okay. And at any point, did you feel either your safety or the public's, other people, members of public safety, was put at risk?
No, I don't think they weren't put at risk. The boardwalk does have a lot of foot traffic, a lot of pedestrians, a lot of children. Some may view the open display of his firearm as a risk to them. Being in our capacity, it didn't seem much of a risk to us, although it was a concern to us because it was something that we don't frequently see. And that was probably my first time I saw someone actually carrying openly on the boardwalk. That was our main concern.
Okay. Now, you just said there wasn't a risk. I'm going to ask you this. Are you aware of that any handling of firearms poses a risk of an accidental discharge?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So, based on the appellant's responses and then the actions you took, did it require the handling of his firearm?
It did, yes. We had to physically take the firearm off his waistband.
Okay. Now, he did not pose or should I say, was there any physical resistance on his part?
No, just the verbal denial of producing his permit, and actually at the point we took his firearm off him, he became verbally defensive against this.
And the fact, though it's a short period of time and you were handling the firearm, you did have to actually handle the firearm, remove it, then secure it.
Yes, we did, because it was loaded, so we did have to take the appropriate precautions because, it was a loaded firearm with a round in the chamber. So there was probably a risk that it could have been accidentally discharged if not handled properly.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Officer. Officer, you testified that nobody was put at risk a moment ago, right? Other than this colloquy with the sergeant regarding the possibility of an accidental discharge, your testimony was that nobody was at risk, right?
That's correct. Not at immediate risk.
And you did indicate that this is there's a heavy amount of pedestrian traffic there in this area that
Yes.
this incident happened? And there was a playground there?
There's a playground adjacent to the boardwalk, yes.
And there was no recreational shooting range nearby, correct?
That's correct.
Now, Mr. Jones, you testified, was also carrying a firearm open, visible to the public, right?
Yes.
And you testified that after he showed his permit, he was allowed to leave.
Yes.
And you didn't even tell him he needed to conceal the firearm.
That's correct.
So the whole issue of where this happened, that's really irrelevant, isn't it? since Mr. Jones was not detained any further than producing his permit, the fact of there being a playground, no shooting range, pedestrian traffic, that really doesn't have anything to do with this issue at hand, does it?
No, not the area. No.
And in terms of the risk of an accidental discharge, I'm assuming that as part of your training, you attended the police academy
Yes.
and you probably periodically engage in in-service trainings?
Yes.
And is part of that training the proper handling of firearms?
Yes.
So you're familiar with how to handle firearms to minimize, if not eliminate, the danger of an accidental discharge?
Yes.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you, you testified that there were 2 magazines. Does that include the one, which I'm assuming, because you said the gun was loaded, that there was a magazine in the gun? The 2 magazines that were seized in connection with this incident, does that number 2 include the one that was actually in the firearm when it was taken off the appellant?
I believe it does.
I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any redirect?
No. I mean, no.
Okay, before we get to the board's questions, just note for the record, that Attorney Greer had a pre-scheduled appointment, and he's left the dais and will not be voting on this particular matter. Attorney Fishbein, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, when you approached Jones and the appellant, in what fashion did you approach them? In a casual conversational mode, or did you have them up against a wall? Describe what was going on.
Yeah, it was a casual, conversation mode. We saw them walking by. We were by, like I said, the bathhouse, so we walked behind them. Kind of excused ourselves, from the police department. Just wanted to see if they had a valid permit. So it was more of a casual conversation. They weren't put against the wall. They weren't laid out on the ground.
Now, did the appellant give you any form of identification, driver's license, something like that?
No, not to me. I was speaking directly with Mr. Jones.
So is it possible that he gave some sort of identification to Officer Hunt?
Officer Hunt was requesting for identification. I don't believe he received anything from the appellant.
Okay. And upon arresting the appellant and searching him, did you happen to search and find a pistol permit?
I believe Detective Hunt, when he was down in detention with the appellant, he looked through his wallet and found his permit within his wallet.
Okay. And what was the appellant arrested for?
Interfering with a police officer.
All right, I think that's all I have at this point. Thank you.
Further questions of the witness?
No,
Chief?
he actually got what I was getting at. And did the detective ask his name and date of birth? I know, you're not sure if he gave him any identification. Did he ask his name and date of birth?
I believe he did. Like I said, I was with Mr. Jones. I'm not sure exactly his direct dialogue, but I'm standard that we would ask him for his name and date of birth.
And then with the name and date of birth, would you then try to check to see if he had a pistol permit? Or did you try to check to see if he had a pistol permit?
I don't believe we checked at that point. I don't recall for sure, though.
Did you verify Mr. Jones's permit?
Yes.
You didn't verify if the appellant had a permit?
No, I checked Mr. Jones's permit. I didn't check the appellant's.
Did Detective Hunt, I think his name is, did he check to see if the appellant had a permit?
I don't believe he did.
Why not?
I don't know.
Is it safe to say when you approached these 2 guys, you kind of assumed they had permits by the way they were carrying openly and you weren't tremendously concerned?
Well,
You have an objection to that?
yeah, I'm going to object because, actually, you know what, that's a fair question. Yeah, that is a fair question.
It certainly is, yeah.
That's a fair question.
No
Well,
objection to that.
it's, I don't like the assume language that
Well,
the
I'll
chief
tell you what,
used.
I was going on based on
Because
the
the
way they
bottom line
approached
is-
him. If you assumed it was two felons about to do an armed robbery, you would have approached them a little differently than
Yes.
walking up to two guys on the boardwalk, openly carrying, so.
Right.
Thank you.
Mr. Cook?
Yeah. You recently changed police departments, didn't you?
Yes.
I've seen you
Yeah, I
before.
can't hear you.
No, I'm sitting across from this gentleman, and I know I've seen him before, and he's testified before me before, and he's always impressed me as being a fair gentleman, and today's testimony is no different. Just a couple of small questions. I know that you had to arrest him, okay, because otherwise you would have had to let him walk. Because you cannot hold a citizen,
Right.
okay, without arresting him. So that is due diligence to protect yourself as well. I understand that. What I don't understand is why, when he was down at the station and they found that he had a pistol permit, knowing that, one, there is no more markings on the boardwalk saying no guns allowed, and two, I forgot what it is because I'm an old guy now, but anyhow, why he wasn't released at that point in time, figuring that his stubbornness had its own price to pay, okay? Because obviously he was doing something which was legal, since open carry is legal in
And now I have to
Connecticut.
object, there's more than one question here.
Yeah, there's a couple questions.
Okay.
Just
break it up.
one at a time.
Why wasn't he just released when he was there, when they found the pistol permit?
Well, at that point, he was already in custody. When he was in the police station, he was already arrested for interfering with us because he wasn't forthcoming with his information. So we're trying to determine if, first of all, if he was legally able to carry the pistol. And if he just produced his permit, we would have confirmed, and he would have been on his way like Mr. Jones. The fact that he wasn't forthcoming with information and was hindering our investigation was the reason why he was arrested for interfering.
Now, did you personally feel interfered with?
Yes.
Okay. And it wasn't just he's really just disturbing the peace?
Right, no, it was more interfering. He wasn't, again, forthcoming with our questions. Again, if he just showed us his permit, like Mr. Jones, that's what we were trying to do.
Yeah. In other words, you looked at it as, this guy's being a stubborn son of a bitch, and he's wasting our time, and we could be doing better things. And protecting the public.
Is there a question there?
Yeah, that's the question. So in other words, that's what it is. He is actually...
I guess the question is, did you pursue the arrest because the appellant was just being stubborn, or did you pursue the arrest for what you might consider other legitimate reasons?
We pursued the arrest because he wasn't cooperating with our investigation. He was hindering what we were trying to accomplish, and at that point,
In other words,
he
he was
was
being
arrested.
stubborn.
Yeah. That's Mr. Cook's characterization.
I don't want my witness
That's
Say
okay.
yes or no.
Wallow
I'm
that
done.
line
I'm
up.
done. I know this man.
Dr. Bernstein?
He's been here before, he's a good man.
Okay.
Just a couple quick questions. One, this happened at 9 o'clock at night, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
2100 hours.
Yes.
Was there any indication that there was any alcohol or any substances involved in the situation
No.
that might have impaired his judgment or in any way like that? No indication?
No indication.
Okay. That's all I have, really.
Is there anything material in the board's questions that require redirect?
No.
Okay. Anything material in the board's questions that you require recross?
No, sir.
Any further witnesses?
That is it.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Drapp, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would call the appellant. Sir, and I apologize because we're going to not use your name here. Could you tell the board what you do for a living?
I work as a security officer at a 55 and older community up in Southbury, Heritage Village. And I also work on their ambulance, their paid staff ambulance part-time for the village also. And I also volunteer on a fire department and ambulance in my own town.
And with respect to your security guard occupation, has the revocation of your permit impacted that at all?
Yes, at the time I was working as an armed officer also, and that's been suspended now. And once I get my permit back, then I go back to work, but I haven't been able to work in that capacity since.
And in terms of your being able to carry a firearm while on duty as an armed guard, does that mean that you had the appropriate endorsements on your permit from the state to do that?
I don't understand.
In terms of the blue card?
I don't understand the question.
In order to carry a firearm as a security guard, did you have to go through any additional training or get any
Yes.
additional certifications from the state police in order to do that?
For a Class 2 license, or a blue card as they would call it, yes.
And that, you had that endorsement on the permit that
Yes.
was revoked?
Yes.
Now, I suppose the question that the board is really wanting to hear your response to is, why didn't you just show the detective your permit?
I base a lot of what I do on principles, and I believe that if I wasn't doing anything illegal, and they weren't stopping everybody on the boardwalk that night to check IDs or check permits or check to make sure they weren't doing anything illegal, then why was I being stopped? I was within the law. I was not doing anything wrong. I was just walking and talking with a friend of mine. And when my permit was demanded, I've given my permit many, many times when it's, hey, I'm just checking. I just want to see if you're okay. Yeah, all right, no problem, here. But when it was demanded and the demeanor that was given to me, I felt like I was being harassed and disrespected. So I stood firm on the, I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't know why you're bothering me.
Let me ask you this. What are your feelings about that decision you made that night in retrospect?
I stand by all my decisions. I take responsibility for my decisions. I wasn't doing anything wrong, so I didn't understand why I was being stopped at all.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
If this were to happen tomorrow, you'd react the same way?
It would depend on how it was brought up to me. Like I said, I've shown the permit.
Same situation.
before.
You're on the boardwalk in West Haven tomorrow night. Cop comes up to you and says,
With the
"I
same
want to see your permit."
With the same attitude and demeanor.
With the same
yes.
attitude, yeah.
Yes,
What would-
I wouldn't.
You'd do the same thing.
Yes, sir.
Well, can we hear about this attitude and demeanor? Because I asked the officer about that, and we're sort of jumping to, and we're making an assumption. I don't know anything about this alleged attitude.
That's exactly what I was going to do. Thank you. Could you describe for the board the demeanor of the, and actually, let me back up for a second. Who was the police official that you primarily interacted with on that day?
Well, I didn't know who he was at the time, but after now, it's Detective Hunt.
Okay, and just to be clear, that's not the gentleman seated here.
No,
seated
sir.
here.
No.
Could you describe for the members of the board Detective Hunt's demeanor when he initially approached you?
I would say at first I was a little surprised because I wouldn't think that a police officer who has a weapon would like somebody coming up behind them to stop them. So it kind of threw me off guard for a second because you don't really know who's coming up behind you at first. So I guess my first reaction was, hey, couldn't they kind of circumvent around and come forward to me instead of coming up from behind me while I'm armed? And they came up on my armed side, which is, it makes you nervous if you have your weapon and somebody comes up behind you in a dark area. I don't think that I would classify it as more of a cordial stop, as the officer stated earlier. It was let me see your permit. And I asked him what I was doing wrong, and he said, well, you're carrying your firearms. And I said, but that's not illegal. What did I do wrong that you're asking me for my ID? So he stated because I was open carrying my permit, and we kind of went back and forth a few times about how it's not illegal to open carry my firearm, and if I was open carrying my firearm, why would I do that if I didn't have a permit? It's kind of showing out in the open if you're doing something illegal. Like in my thoughts, it was, you wouldn't see somebody carrying a bag of drugs out in the open if they were trying to hide the fact that they were doing something illegal. His being right kind of up in my face and right in front of me, the whole situation kind of was intimidating to me when there were several officers standing around me demanding my permit from me, versus if he would have came up and said, hey, listen, a mother and her kids are at the playground, they saw you walk by and you had your gun on you. Can we just verify that you're okay? and we could go assure her that everything's fine, it would have been no problem, officer, here you go. I mean, I have friends and family that are law enforcement. I have a lot of respect for law enforcement. I work with them every day. I mean, it was just a bad situation. The way that came off to me was more of a, you're going to do as I tell you to, or I'm going to arrest you. And I was kind of, yes, I was pushing back a little bit because I knew the rights. I didn't quote anything California law, though. I don't know what that was about in the statement. What I quoted was Terry versus Ohio, there was no reasonable suspicion that I was committing any crime to ask me for an ID. And to my knowledge, I didn't think Connecticut was a stop and ID state, so I didn't think he had the right to ask me for the permit. And then by the body language and the way he was talking to me.
What harm would have happened if you just gave him the permit?
Like I said, it's a matter of principle, sir. You know, if it's my right that I don't have to show it, why should I? If you know what I mean? Does he stop everybody walking by and asking for their ID to make sure that they're not
You have it of
wanted?
exercising every right that you have to its extreme?
I wouldn't call it extreme.
Okay, to its fullest extent?
Sure.
Okay. Sorry, Jim, go right ahead.
That's okay. The last question I have for you is, with respect to the arrest that was occasioned by this incident, what was the disposition of that arrest?
It was dismissed.
And when you say dismissed, just so we're clear, because I know that you were here all morning and heard the terms bandied about, and certainly there's attorneys on the panel, it was not mollied, right? It was dismissed outright.
Yes, and the prosecutor was quoted in the newspaper as calling it a nothing case.
I have nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
I just have a question before we get to cross. Pursuing that, did you go through trial and dismissed after a trial?
No, sir. It was dismissed. We never went to trial.
You went in front of a judge and a judge
Yes.
dismissed it without hearing any evidence, any testimony, any trial?
Correct.
Okay. Cross?
Sure. Okay. Sir, without disclosing your address, that's why we're calling you the appellant. If you could, just answer a few questions for me. Where were you born?
I was born in Derby.
Derby.
Yep.
And you've been a Connecticut resident your whole life?
Yes, sir.
Were you raised there?
Yes.
Okay. How long have you had your permit?
Probably about 4 years, maybe 5 now.
Okay. What's the highest grade of education you've completed?
I'm currently attending college.
Okay, so it's high school, and how many years of college?
I'm going to be a junior. So
Okay.
3 years.
Okay. Now, you heard everything the officer testified to, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's true that you did, and you believe this too, I think you just asserted this, you were doing absolutely nothing wrong, and that's what the officer testified. You heard that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, would you agree that Officer Hunt, his approach upset you a little bit?
I wouldn't say it upset me as more as just like startled me. It wasn't more of I was mad because they were stopping me. I think they could have went about the stop differently.
Sure, but you mentioned this also, and I was going to ask you about this, that they chose to approach you from behind as opposed to coming around and showing you everything they were going to do so you would have time to react. But once they did stop you, you turned around and you saw that there were 2 uniformed police officers. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
And at some point, Officer Detective Hunt explained to you that he wanted to see your pistol permit.
Correct.
Okay. And you refused.
Yes, sir.
And he asked you again. And did he explain to you, do you recall him explaining to you that he, just hear the question, he needed to see your pistol permit to ensure you're a properly valid permit holder. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you still refused?
Yes.
And did he also tell you that you were leaving him no choice but to arrest you?
Yes.
Okay. So he gave you options. I mean, the idea now that he surprised you is down diminished. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Correct.
Okay. So let me ask you some other questions. Isn't it true that prior to obtaining your pistol permit, and now I'm hearing, I didn't know this, but you had a security guard permit, guard card.
Yes.
That but prior to obtaining your pistol permit, you had attended an approved firearm safety training course?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And isn't it true that you had to produce documentation to the issuing authority, then your local local agency first and then the state, that you in fact completed a firearm safety course?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you've never been convicted of a felony or any of the disqualifying misdemeanors that would prevent you from having a pistol permit? That's correct?
Correct.
Okay. But you also had to provide fingerprints to the issuing authority to get your permit,
Correct.
correct? You complied with all of this.
Mhm.
So you're disclosing private information to get your permit. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, would you agree with me that that there are people that should not be allowed to carry a gun in public?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Would you also agree with me that there are people in the state that have earned the privilege to carry a pistol permit, but also, for a variety of reasons, have lost that privilege? Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree with me that you exercise poor judgment by not producing a permit?
No, I would not.
You would not agree with that?
No.
Okay. Thank you. I am finished.
Is there any, okay, in a minute. Is there any redirect based on the cross?
No, sir.
Okay. Dr. Bernstein?
I just have a couple of questions, if I may. Just a couple quick, just sort of general ones. Are you a veteran?
No, I'm not.
You ever apply to get into the military?
No, I didn't.
Never. You ever apply to become a police officer?
No, I've not.
Never? Okay. So, you believe at the time that you were required to show your firearm?
I'm sorry?
You believe, at the time that you were asked, did you believe that you were required to show your firearm?
No, I believe I was not required to unless there was reasonable suspicion of a crime being
Firearm or
committed.
permit?
Your permit, I'm sorry.
Right.
Your
yeah.
permit.
I
So-
understand what you meant, yes.
Okay, and so you didn't feel you had to, and that's why you objected.
Yes, sir.
Now, one of the things you said is this was principle because they didn't stop other people. Did you happen to see anyone else with an open firearm other than you and your friend?
No.
Okay, so you don't know if they would have stopped them also?
My observation, they weren't stopping everybody to check and see if they were breaking the law.
But they weren't, you didn't see anybody else with an open
No.
firearm? Okay. And to that end, you and Mr. Jones had an open firearm.
Correct.
How were you wearing it?
I was wearing it on my right side hip in a dual retention holster.
Okay. So it was pretty obvious you
Oh,
had it.
yes.
What, was that on purpose?
I usually carry that way, yeah.
Okay. Is that any particular reason?
Personal preference.
Okay. Is it to make a statement?
No.
Or just how you prefer to carry it?
Yes.
Okay. But primarily, you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the primary reason that you didn't show your permit was you didn't like the way he asked.
Well, it was more of I wasn't doing anything illegal, so I didn't know why they were stopping me in the first place.
Right, but I wrote down, you said if he had approached you differently,
Correct. I have in the past.
then you would have shown it.
Correct.
So ultimately, you didn't like the way he asked.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Cook?
Yes. First question. I've heard that you did not like the way that they approached you. Now, did you really mean to say you did not like the way that Detective Hunt approached you as opposed to Police Officer Vivenzo? Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I didn't have much dealing with Officer
So
Benzo.
it has nothing to do with this gentleman?
No, sir.
Okay. Just with the way that somebody approached you who is not here today?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I think you're stubborn, by the way. I'm going to say that up front, and I'm going to run you through some other questions. Did you feel that there was no probable cause to stop you?
Yes, sir.
All right. Did you stop and consider that your viewpoint and the viewpoint of local police differ as to what is important, and that while you may be focusing on your rights, they are focusing on safety of the public generally? Did you stop to consider that?
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Have you seen any of those stupid goddamn videos on the internet about what you're supposed to do when a policeman stops you and you're
Most of them are
carrying?
wrong.
Most of them are wrong.
Yeah,
I agree with it.
you've seen them, right?
Yes, yes.
And in seeing them, you know what kind of a negative connotation or negative result can occur if you do that kind of stupid stuff, right?
Yes.
Would it surprise you to know that I too carry openly upon occasion, but that I would never refuse to give a police officer my pistol permit?
No, it wouldn't surprise me.
Okay. Would you please stop and consider what you did and think about the responsibility of ever doing that again?
Yes.
Do you recognize what negative connotations, what negative results could have occurred from you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Witness Jay.
Your attorney started out with, he was going to show that you made a boneheaded mistake. But the testimony, your testimony doesn't say that. So where's the disconnect? What boneheaded mistake was your attorney talking about in his opening statement?
I'm not sure that was his words.
'Cause I was assuming those were a quote. I was assuming that meant you were going to say, yeah, you know, second thought, maybe I should have just showed him the permit and been on with it. But you don't know what boneheaded mistake he was talking about?
Well, apparently, I guess maybe the better route was to show the permit and get the officer's information and bring it up with the individual department about how I felt about my rights being violated or
I
the way
think
it
that
was
probably
wrong.
would have been better. Can you, first of all, no one doubts your right to open carry. You have a permit. You can do that all day long. You do it anywhere except for places that are prohibited, as you know. No big deal. But can you understand that walking on a boardwalk in public in summertime where people are around, it may cause someone concern? Rightfully or wrongly, I mean, someone's going to be concerned. And maybe, you know, an officer asking you for a permit could allay some of those concerns of the public should they ask, to prevent any type of confrontation or anything. So having that in mind, do you think it might have been reasonable for him to just quickly ask for a permit? As you heard him testify, he said, we assumed he had a permit, he would just show it to us and off we'd go. I mean, he was thinking about it.
Yeah.
He wasn't unreasonable.
I think it was the way that it was asked. It wasn't the actual act of asking itself.
That's a very subjective thing. Sometimes someone being stopped, and not necessarily in this situation, but for suspected criminal activity, it turns out not to be criminal activity. That person doesn't know what the officer knows. You know, so it's best to comply, go along, and if you have a problem with it later, make your complaint. But at the time, it's not, as you learned, on the street.
Right.
Are you aware that you are required to carry your permit on you when you're carrying a firearm?
Yes, sir.
Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure. But I let them know I had a permit. I just didn't want to show it to them because I didn't
Okay.
feel I had to.
And I actually asked the officer, but I'm not sure. Did they ask your name and date of birth?
No, they did not.
Did he ask for any other identification?
No, they did not.
Did you supply any other type of identification?
No.
So, no, I guess, I was going to ask when would it be appropriate for an officer to ask someone in that situation for their permit? I think you covered that. It's kind of a reasonable thing to do. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Attorney Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You understand that from time to time, police officers are investigating crimes.
Correct.
you understand that from time to time, the investigation of those crimes involves people having guns.
Correct.
So it's certainly possible that an officer approaching you from the front, back, side, whatever, could be in the process of investigating a crime involving a gun.
Correct.
And is concerned for his or her well-being. And in that situation, do you think it's reasonable for the officer to ask about you being there, having a permit, that kind of stuff?
If it was, if I was walking in an intimidating manner, if I was acting inappropriately, yeah, absolutely. But just kind of walking along, talking with somebody doesn't seem like, the knee-jerk, oh, there's a gun, I'm going to stop this guy and see what he's up to. If we weren't actually doing anything to arouse any kind of suspicion, but just walking, then no, I wouldn't see why they would possibly stop you for no reason.
But you would agree that's putting yourself in the mind of the police officer.
Correct.
And how they're doing. Because we should hold police officers to a higher standard, and, that they're going to act in a certain way that's even greater than that of the general public.
You would hope so.
You would hope so.
Yes.
Absolutely. So the portion of this that I'm having a little trouble with is the approach, and we still haven't gotten there, so I think I'm going to have to take you down the road. We know that you're traveling westward on the boardwalk.
I'm not sure where east or west is there. I was going down towards Jimmy's from where the fairgrounds actually already have the carnivals and stuff. So if that's west, then yes.
And it's approximately 9 o'clock at night.
Yes.
And it's June.
Yes.
And 9 o'clock at night in June, it's either dark or it's getting dark.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And are there lights at the boardwalk?
It's dimly lit, but yeah, there is lights.
Okay. And you're sauntering or walking in a fast pace?
We're just strolling along. We're just talking, that's all.
Okay. And it's just you and Mr. Jones?
Yes, sir.
And you said that the Officer Hunt approached you on the right-hand side.
Yes, sir.
And what did he do? Did he grab your arm? Did he touch you, tap you?
He kind of came up like this and said, hi, West Haven Police Department, I need to see your permit. And I asked him why, and he said, because you're carrying a gun. And I said, okay. And he asked if I did have a permit, and I told him, yes, I did. And then, like I said, we just kind of went back and forth of, give me your permit, and I'm saying no.
Sure, we've heard all that. I just want to whittle down a little bit
Sure.
here. So at this time, you're on the right-hand side of Jones.
Yes.
Okay. And this officer takes Jones off to the side to have their own conversation.
Yeah, he went off to the left, and we kind of stayed where I made the initial contact.
So it was a one-on-one?
Yes.
Okay. And I heard something about other officers. Were there other officers that...
I believe there was one or maybe two more that were also
When
there.
did these other officers come into play?
Shortly after. It was pretty quick. I was
shortly
more
after.
focused on talking to Detective Hunt, but I know there was at least one more that showed up because he had asked me if I was doing this because I watched a YouTube video. I told him no.
Well, who's he?
I don't know what his name was.
Okay, so some other officer asked
some other
you.
officer, uniformed officer. that
Okay.
came up.
So is it fair to say that it's 2-on-1? It's 2 officers with you and 2 officers with Jones?
Yes.
Okay. And based upon the timing of the other officers coming, do you have a belief that the original officers called for some sort of assistance, or those other officers just happened to be around?
I think they just happened to be around. I know there's usually officers that patrol down there for whatever reason. They seem to up their manpower down there. But yeah, I didn't see Detective Hunt call for anybody else on the radio, and I was with him, as far as we are apart. So I don't think he called anybody else in unless they may have called on their way up to walking up to us.
Okay.
I don't know.
So I have enough about this scene. Let me ask you about college. Where are you going?
Houstonic in Bridgeport.
And what is your degree program?
Nurse anesthetist.
Nursing assist?
Anesthetist. Anesthesiology.
Oh, okay. And what are your grades like?
I hold a 3.0 GPA.
Who do you live with?
My wife and 2 children,
How old are your kids?
13 and 3.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Further questions? Hearing none. Based on the board's questions, any redirect that you might have?
No, sir.
Recross, based on the board's questions?
I'm just going to ask you.
No, recross
Oh, no.
of the witness. Okay. Any further witnesses? Okay. Rebuttal?
Just really quick, Officer, how many police officers responded to this incident? You heard what the appellant testified to.
I did. I don't remember any other officers coming down. It was Detective Ryan Hunt on patrol down there. If others came, I don't remember. It may have been a transport officer, but I don't remember.
Okay. That's it.
Any? No. All right. No further questions on the board? You can do closing.
Mr. Chairman, board members, I've had the privilege of sitting here all day, which this has been a first experience for me, but I'm satisfied with the board's questions, that they have a good feel for what the issues are involved in this case, so I would waive any closing.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney. Closing?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right. To conceal or not to conceal, this is the question that each pistol permit holder must choose before carrying his or her pistol or revolver in public. Unlike several other states in the Union, our legislature has decided not to answer this question, thereby allowing choice, which, by the way, is freedom. But with freedom comes responsibility. Responsibility to make sound, prudent decisions should one have to use a firearm to defend oneself or third person, or more subtly, when merely exercising dominion and control over the weapon. There are pros and cons to carrying a firearm openly, either openly or concealed. I'm not going to debate them all here. It is, however, up to each pistol permit holder to know and recognize the consequences for the decision to carry in either manner. Here, most reasonable people recognize by carrying a firearm openly, it will draw attention from concerned citizens. In Connecticut, our society's norms are more sensitive to people carrying guns openly, probably due to the shootings we hear about nearly every night on the news or the devastation that occurred in Newtown. Whatever the cause, each pistol permit holder bears the responsibility to recognize the current sensitivity that our community has on this issue and to take appropriate action to adjust their use and possession of the respective weapon. Our legislature has, in accordance with the Constitution, set up a statutory scheme to exclude those citizens deemed unsuitable to carry a firearm in public. Connecticut General Statute 2935B, as cited during the hearing today, the legislature commands, quote, the holder of a permit issued pursuant to 2928 shall carry such permit upon one's person while carrying such pistol or revolver. This is not discretionary language. It's mandatory on each pistol permit holder. As a consequence of carrying a pistol or revolver openly, a suitable permit holder must know and recognize that they are admitting to one half of the statute. While the legislator has remained silent on whether a permit holder must offer a permit upon the demand of any authorized police officer to verify contemporaneous possession of both the permit and a firearm, it appears that is their intent, to have the permit as well as the firearm. In order to ensure compliance with the other portion of this statute, a brief, limited inquiry by the police is not unreasonable to ensure the public safety. Constitutionally speaking, the U.S. Constitution cases are replete with cases that has granted exceptions to the Fourth Amendment search warrant requirement, especially when facts of a given case indicate at least reasonable suspicion that there is some exigency or impracticality to obtain a search warrant by the police. Also, the Supreme Court is more likely to grant such an exception when the detention is limited in scope and duration. That is exactly what occurred during this incident. In fact, you heard evidence that one permit holder, Jones, was allowed to continue to move freely once he was deemed to be in compliance with the statute. Conversely, the appellant, chose not to comply with the request and left the officer no choice but to exercise more authority and force to ensure compliance with the statute. His actions can best be described, and I've heard that from his testimony today, as cavalier, immature, and actually subversive, suggesting that he will not follow a statutory scheme that regulates firearms, licensing, or possession. I also find it ironic that he takes such a position when he has already given up personal information in order to obtain the permit to begin with. The officer was merely checking his status at the very time he is exercising his privilege, the actual possession of his firearm in public. I mean, I stop and pause here. How else is the government going to ensure, and has, as he actually admitted to here, that there are people who lose this privilege? How else are the police going to know this unless we have duly licensed permit holders who are supposed to be suitable to comply with brief detention by the police? Another way to look at this case is to recognize that if the police are not allowed to make this limited inquiry in the field, why have the statutory scheme to exclude anyone from possessing a firearm in public? I have been presenting these cases long enough to know that at one point or another, each and every board member in front of me recognized the need to exclude members of our community from possessing a firearm. This case tests the practicality of enforcing compliance with 2935B, ensuring those persons in possession of a firearm have been properly vetted at the time that the possession occurs. This brings me to a few closing points, Mr. Chairman. I'll concede that there's no history of past violence by the appellant and that his criminal charges have been dismissed. However, this is not a criminal case. It's an administrative hearing to determine whether he's a suitable person to carry a loaded firearm in public. You have heard evidence that when requested by a uniformed officer to show he is a valid permit holder contemporaneous to possession of his firearm, the appellant refused for no other reason but, my understanding is he cited the Constitution, but he's also saying that there was no, I heard probable cause, reasonable suspicion to broadly justify noncompliance. As I stated earlier, his behavior can best be described as cavalier, immature, and subversive. Now, I've also heard that he wants the board to consider that his pistol permit losing his pistol permit has detrimentally affected his employment, but he still could get employment. It's not a requisite of having a pistol permit for employment. I didn't hear any testimony from the appellant himself when Secretary Fishbein delved into his this approach that the officer, Detective Hunt, who's not here today, that his approach was unreasonable. I think it was very appropriate the way he identified himself and asked him for his pistol permit. I didn't hear anything that was unreasonable there. So the bottom line is this case shows that the appellant's character and temperament are called into question in a diminishing way. It shows that he does not possess the proper moral, intellectual, and emotional attributes of sound character necessary to carry a firearm in public safely. Therefore, the Commissioner of Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection requests this board to affirm the revocation to ensure the public safety and the citizens of Connecticut.
Thank you. You want to do the factory rendition?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The appellant comes before us a permit holder at one time, having been issued a permit in 2009. The single incident that we've heard about today happened on June 2nd, 2013, at which time the appellant and Mr. Jones were walking in a beach area on the boardwalk in West Haven. The appellant and Mr. Jones were openly carrying firearms upon their waists. Officers from the West Haven Police Department approached them and asked for them to produce their permits. Jones complied. The appellant did not. Subsequently, the appellant was arrested. During search of the appellant, during his arrest, a permit is discovered in the appellant's effects. That is really the sole issue before this board here today, and this board is charged with determining whether or not the boneheaded action of the appellant, as characterized by his lawyer originally, makes him unsuitable to maintain a pistol permit. By way of opinion, I must state, papers, papers, papers. Our rights do not wax and wane based upon the latest Gallup poll. Without the testimony, I think it would have been easy for myself to find for the appellant. However, I'm puzzled at this time because certainly it isn't always appropriate to fail to produce a permit in any situation. And I'm concerned in that the appellant says that given the same set of facts, he would take the same or go down the same road. And I wasn't there, and I don't know. And that's a pause to myself. I think the incident itself doesn't give rise to finding against the appellant, but I'm just, I guess, concerned about the future. But nonetheless, does it make him unsuitable? Probably not.
You're going to comment. The lawyering profession has a saying amongst some lawyers, there's such a thing as ineffective assistance of client. And here, as far as the appellant and his counsel is concerned, from my point of view, there was gross ineffective assistance of client. I agree with Attorney Fishbein that the mere conduct on this particular day, standing alone, maybe wasn't sufficient. It wouldn't be sufficient to find this particular appellant unsuitable. But the conduct of this appellant here today, virtually guaranteeing that if the exact same circumstances were to happen again, he would react the same way, even though he admittedly knows the better way of handling things would have been to just hand his permit and go on his way. Now, I understand that police officers sometimes don't go to the Gibbs School of protocol or whatever it is. I understand sometimes the officers can be a little gruff. But the point is, as Attorney Fishbein had pointed out, we can hold our officers to a higher standard, but we also hold gun holders to a higher standard. And somebody walking along a boardwalk with a lot of people is his way of handling with an open gun, approached by a couple of police officers, not having any idea why, that turns around and gets himself in an altercation with the police officer for the mere fact is that, in his opinion, he doesn't have to show his permit. He doesn't have, he's not required to show his permit. The statute does not require a permit, but it sure would have been a better way of acting, and I believe the appellant has said might have been a better way, an easier way of handling. But on the other hand, he's shown no remorse. On the other hand, to me, he's shown what counsel for the issuing authorities indicated, cavalier attitude. As far as I'm concerned, this situation will happen tomorrow again or at any other time, the appellant would act the exact same way. I think that, in my opinion, that lacks maturity, the requisite maturity for a gun holder or a gun permit holder. So on that point, I think Attorney Fishbein and I agree, and basically on the facts, we may come to different conclusions, however. Further comment? Dr. Bernstein?
I agree that there's the letter of the law saying that the appellant doesn't have to necessarily show his permit, FS, and I get that. This happened 7 months after Newtown, in the state that Newtown occurred in. And it occurs to me that if you're aware of the presence of the situation that's going on in the state and everyone's awareness of firearms and sensitivity to that, that there were probably people that close out after Newtown that were probably very concerned about seeing two open weapons, two open firearms. And so was it something that perhaps he had to do? Well, I don't know, but was it something that if he had looked at the totality of the situation, might have seen that it was understandable? I think so. Please.
Supplement. You know, I had expected to hear some testimony from the officer. You know, we got 10 calls. We had all these people that were just, you know, they were driving people nuts walking down the boardwalk. It's not what we heard. So that definitely came into play here. I mean, it's the surrounding circumstances also.
Right.
You know, it's at night, not doing anything illegal. You know,
And again, 7 months out of Newtown, you know, one of the worst tragedies that ever hit. Everyone's awareness in terms of firearms, I think, was very high at that point.
well, those that don't own firearms, I would agree, or those that don't like firearms, it's sort of like solidified something. But you know, based upon, evidently they got no calls. So, you know, based upon that, you know, they weren't roughhousing, they weren't fighting, you know, having guns on them, they weren't, you know, brandishing or playing around. It appears like the public didn't even realize this was going on, which to their credit, I guess, you know, we weren't there, so I don't.
It's a good point.
But that would also be a preventative thing for when people go up and say, hey, there's two guys over there with guns. Yeah, well, we've already checked them, they've got permits, it's good to go. Because, you know, that's what we do. Not only do we respond to those who are complaining, but we also try to circumvent those complaints by going forward and saying, hi guys, you know, we're here just checking out the area. You see we got guns here, everybody got permits, good, go.
I don't think anybody's saying that what the officers did wrong, it was wrong. You know, so.
No, but you were kind of saying that there was no problem. No, they were kind of trying to circumvent a problem.
No, I was addressing what David said, you know, about, you know, Newtown and how things are different and people are more aware and all that stuff. And I just, as I said, I had expected to hear something about we were getting all these calls, and that's not part of this case. So.
Right.
And since we're talking about this, actually, what about the just respecting the authority of the police?
On principle.
Yeah, I mean, whether or not the state and the city of West Haven was super sensitive to gun-carrying people, I don't see as the issue. What I see as the issue is the appellant's conduct when he was approached. His conduct is, I don't have to show you, so therefore I'm not going to. I think that reflects a level of combativeness, a level of immaturity that, by its very nature, makes a particular appellant unsuitable. Yeah, I would have preferred hearing from the officer who had direct contact with the appellant. I think that could have gotten a lot of the questions out of the way. Unfortunately, we don't have that. But whether he taps him on the shoulder, comes from the front, comes from the side, comes from the back, said, "Sir, please excuse me. May I have your pistol permit?" Whether we have a super sensitive society or not, does not eradicate, at least in my mind, the fact that when approached by a police officer in uniform, saying, "We just, you know, like to see your gun permit, your pistol permit," the appellant took just, I think, a totally unreasonable stance. To this day, sits here today and tells us that he would do the exact same thing, faced with the exact same circumstances. Well, he certainly didn't learn anything from this process, and didn't learn anything from these events, and that concerns me. It concerns me greatly. Further comment? Mr. Cook.
You know, we're supposed to protect the people of the state of Connecticut from dangerous people. I don't see this man as a dangerous person. I see him as a stubborn person. Yeah, it's weird. We live in interesting times, which is both a Chinese curse as well as a promise. We have our legal system and a police system based on something called probable cause. And people can disagree as to what probable cause is. Now, I'm not a mind reader. I can't read police minds, the appellant's minds, or even my fellow board members' minds. And therefore, I also know that I cannot read the mind of the legislature, which does not put into the law, you must show your permit if stopped. There is nothing illegal done here by this man's refusing to show it. It's not part of the body of the law, the black letter law. And one looks at it that way. As for the interesting times, I think we all are aware of the political environment we live in today and the fighting which is going back and forth over citizens' rights. We watch it on TV every night, whether we want to or not. The environment, the political environment, has been poisoned. It's been poisoned against people who own guns. And it is often heard that gun owners are deeper in the closet than the gay community ever was, because we all live in fear. What do we live in fear of? Well, I think the appellant in this case did something dumb, nothing illegal. I don't think that he has shown any violence, any susceptibility to violence. So, what it comes down to, and I always go back to the Nicholson case. One event in a spotless history is not a cause for the denial of a permit, especially when there's no violence involved. It may be uncomfortable, but it's called ordered liberty. Now, I would have liked to have seen Detective Hunt. Perhaps I'm prejudiced because I know this man. He's been before us before. He's honest as the day, and I listened to his words. And I did not hear anything out of him which evoked fear on the part of himself, his partner, or the public. So I know the decision I'm going to make here. And I want you all to think about it in your own consciences before you vote. All right? That's all I got to say.
Further comments? Chief?
I got to say, in the beginning, I was encouraged by the appellant's attorney's opening statement that he was going to prove the appellant made a boneheaded mistake. And as I said, I assumed he was going to come out and say, yeah, you know, after thinking about this, I should have just showed the permit, and that's what I would do in the future. And he even testified he realized it probably was a better thing to have done, just given his permit. Especially knowing that he was required to carry the permit with him when he was carrying a firearm, which he actually did in fact have on his person. There was just really no reason. So after the appellant's testimony, I was disappointed. I thought this was going another way. I think his attorney understood that a mistake was made, and Attorney Blando brought that up with effective use of, or effective counsel of client comment. And I think his attorney was actually expecting him to say, I made a mistake and it won't happen again, and everyone would have felt very uncomfortable with that. But I am uncomfortable with the fact that he's still here today and says he would do the exact same thing, which makes this more than just a one-time incident. It's likely to occur again. And he says he's been stopped in the past and asked for his permit, which he's given, so we can only assume he would be stopped again, and we could find ourselves here again.
Yeah, I keep on going back to I think we all agree that at a certain level what happened that day could have gone a different way. But this is a trial de novo, and we sit here today charged with determining whether or not the appellant is suitable or unsuitable, or that hybrid, issuing authority at this time. One must beg the question, he's been without a permit for a year, can't put us in his shoes on that day. Perhaps at a certain level he has learned a lesson, although I agree, stubborn. Certainly
And he testified he hasn't learned a lesson.
No. I mean, certainly one would find offense to a police officer pulling somebody over and saying, hey, I just wanted to check if you got a driver's license. Different situation, but you'd be a little bit miffed if that was to happen, absent anything else. I don't know. I'm glad we had this discussion.
Further comment? Dr.
It
Brinkley?
occurs to me that there's even a fourth, in this case, possibly a fourth option, and that is suitability at this time. Because if it happened again, it would kind of indicate a lack of suitability. And
Well, that's where I'm at.
right. So, and kind
It's a
of.
good
I think
idea.
Attorney Fishbein made an excellent point earlier, that based on the conduct of that particular night, okay, he's upset, the officer came up to him in not such a, nice manner, resuming, taking his version of the event. But what I can't seem to let loose of is his position that if it happened again the same way, he'd act the same way he did before. He doesn't, as he sits here now, I suspect that this appellant sees that he did nothing wrong other than, yeah, it would have been easier had I done something different. But, I have a right to do that. He had no right asking for my permit. To me, based on this event, that reflects a certain lack of suitability. And that's what I'm dealing with. That's what I'm dealing with, the future.
If he does it again, he will lose his permit, period.
Well, right, but I'm not willing to take
Do you think he's dangerous? That's the question.
It isn't a question. It's whether or not the appellant is suitable, given all the circumstances. Not just, is he dangerous? No, the gentleman hasn't killed anybody we know of. He hasn't misused his firearm that we know of. Yeah, he depends on his firearm for income. Okay, sorry that's the case. The question is, each and every one of us have to decide whether or not the individual we see here, circumstances that brought him here, present a suitable individual.
What is
And
the
to me,
definition of suitability?
well, you may have a different definition from what I have, but to me, suitability would have been, I did wrong. I lost it. The cop came up to me. I didn't like the way he came up to me. I lost it, but I understand that was wrong, and that next time if it were to happen, I would handle it totally differently. But that isn't what I heard.
But the point is that there are this many of us on this board, and we're supposed to vote our conscience.
Right.
You're right for your vote, I am right for mine, everybody on this board. That is how we guarantee fairness of the process.
Right, and that's why there's more than one person.
Don't
sitting
beat
up
yourself
there.
up on it.
I'm not beating myself up. I'll beat you up on it. But
You heard that all? He's going to beat me up.
But the point, but that's the point. I think, as I said at the outset, this is a classic, to me, classic case of ineffective assistance of client.
As I say in Italian, testudoro, hard-headed.
Yeah. Okay. Further comments?
Let's vote.
Okay. Mr. Cook wants to vote. We'll start with Mr. Cook. Mr. Cook.
The appellant is suitable at this time.
Okay. Appellant. Ms. Johnson.
Issuing authority.
Chief Rosensweig.
Issuing authority.
Attorney Fishbein. I'm going to go with Dr. Bernstein. Dr. Bernstein,
At this time.
appellant at this time. Chair votes issuing authority. What do we got here? We got
Appellant wins.
2, 3. That's a, yeah. 3-3 vote on a tie vote, the appellant wins.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Mr. Attorney, please do not take our chairman's comments about the case. Now, bear with me, let me finish, okay? It's an honorable thing not to put words in your client's mouth. You're an honorable man. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, requesting a break, okay, 5-minute break.
Closing